Live from deep in an underground bunker in East Tennessee, this is America's premier mortgage field services expert, Paul Williams.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you back to another edition of Foreclosurepedia podcast. Foreclosurepedia podcast presentation of the Foreclosurepedia radio network, which premieres weekly. Today is the 11th of June, 2017. It's a Sunday. Time is 1400 hours Eastern Daylight Time. I'm doing an op-ed today. I want to talk to you all about the Black Swan. The Black Swan is coming. NAMPs cannot even see it for all of the blue skying that they are doing. You know, excuse me. You know, in the same way that the National Association Mortgage Field Services regime's offender members are being labeled financial terrorists, so too is one of the larger financial institutions in the mortgage field services industry, Deutsche Bank, whose woes have never gone away really, since the 2008 crisis. Well, they're up a creek without a paddle in the fight that they're currently engaged with respect to Italian prosecutors. Currently on trial in Milan for concealing losses pertaining to Banca Monte dei Paschi di Siena SPA. In fact, Deutsche Bank is being charged as an international criminal organization for their actions with respect to evidence pointing to the rigging of internal indexes. Deutsche Bank and Nomura Holdings, they're both on trial for colluding with Monte Paschi to hide the losses. And look, those losses were so grave that it almost bankrupted the Italian firm. Best I can tell, about 13 former employees, and all of them were managers, have been charged with false accounting and market manipulation. And why is this important? Look, in Italy, how prosecutions work, and especially when they use terms like international criminal organization, there is no latitude. So in the same way, when we looked at other large banks that got in a world of shit over here in the United States and Germany and the UK were able to call over here to regulators and say, look, just fine them. That's not going to happen. And the reason it's not going to happen in Italy is they established their legislative code in such a manner as it could not happen. No one can inject themselves to change the outcome. And they did this because for years they fought very protracted and convoluted battles against the mafia. And so, in fact, if the prosecutor wanted to strike a lesser deal or didn't want to perhaps even prosecute, that prosecutor would go to prison. There is no latitude. When we look at Deutsche Bank, just let's take the 16th of September 2016. DOJ hit them for $14 billion. Settle investigation. This goes all the way back to 2008. They posted a net loss of $2.05 billion in their fourth quarter, of 2016. They're in a world of crap. And the problem becomes even more exacerbated. You see, when you look at Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, he held meetings back in December with Sergei Gorkov, chairman of VEB, which is a Russian state-owned bank, and it's been under, and so VEB has been under sanctions since 2014 by the United States government. And in essence, those sanctions dealt with Russia's annexation of the Crimea and the aggression in the Ukraine. VEB, why is this important? And how does it tie to Deutsche Bank? I need to go no further than say, let's talk about international financing. Let's talk about VEB for a moment, though. Fidelity Advisors Emerging Markets Income Fund, as I'm reading it now, shows that it held more than $62 million in fixed income securities as of 31 December 2016. Various Deutsche Bank mutual funds that operate in the U.S. own tens of millions of dollars of VEB debt securities. JP Morgan's Emerging Markets Debt Fund shows that as of 30 November 2016, they held $20.5 million in VEB debt securities. Now it's curious because they also have a position assigned to their Ireland holdings. You have other mutual fund names such as PIMCO, Putnam, and Vanguard associated with VEB. As I've said for nearly 2 years, the third quarter of 2017 is going to usher in the next great recession. And that recession is going to make the 2008 crisis look like a joke. And it's not just me that's saying this. Look, the National Bureau of Economic Research runs a committee. It's called the Business Cycle Dating Committee. And look, this is not some kind of J-date or dating website, for executives. I'm going to quote from their website. The NBER's Business Cycle Dating Committee maintains a chronology of the U.S. business cycle. The chronology comprises alternating dates of peaks and troughs in economic activity. A recession is a period between a peak and a trough. And an expansion is a period between a trough and a peak. So when we actually look to understand the business cycle and what the Business Cycle Dating Agency does, we first have to have some definitions. So, for example, what is a business cycle? Business cycle generally has 4 phases: the expansion, the peak, the contraction, and the trough. And while they don't necessarily occur at regular intervals, they do have recognizable indicators. The Business Cycle Dating Agency pegs Q3 of this year as going into the next recession. Now, they don't make forecasts. What they do is they look at historical data and they say, this has happened based upon these indices, and here's where we're at. And ever so more important is what we're talking about Q3 of this year and why we're going to hit the crisis. With nationalism sweeping globally, the simple and salient fact is that those whom have forced the greatest pain upon minority and females and labor, those individuals, the financial terrorists at the NAMPS regime, they're strategically aligned to fall like dominoes. Dominoes, which they are. The vampire squid is back and it's on steroids. And while we've relabeled subprime mortgages as subtranche, or in the gutter as they use the French word, the reality is that buying through the student loan and auto loan debt loads, both of which are already out of control and both of which are defaulting in historical levels, we're already framing our next crisis, To complicate things even more, though, when we look at retirees, and when we say retirees, we're talking people generally over 65. And let me pause here for a moment and inject this. We have baby boomers retiring, and they have been for the past couple of years at historic levels. We're talking anywhere from 14 to 19,000 people per day. And that's going to happen for the next 5 to 6 years. But those retirees that I'm talking about right now, they're hoarding cash. By and large, most are reaching, and when we go back historically 10 to 15 years, most are reaching their 80s with more money than they held in their 60s. And while you may or may not praise that as frugality, the Federal Reserve and Wall Street banksters, they're not above them. And therein lies the rub, as the Bard would say. You cannot have capitalism without capital. While prices have recovered to pre-housing crisis levels, we're talking pre-2008, there's been extremely slow wage growth. It's stagnant in most cases. And what this means is that there are virtually zero affordable homes. When you have no affordable housing, you begin to see a gobbling up of the MDUs for rent, multiple dwelling units. And we have had virtually a flat line in new construction. And this means people do not buy and sell in the residential arena because the volumes are no longer there. We're looking at a Ponzi scheme as well, not just by the NAMPS financial terrorists and how they defraud minority females and labor, but we're looking about it being perpetuated upon the back of the US dollar and the Japanese yen. And we're going to get on that here in just a moment. We're going to talk about that, the black swan, the high frequency trading. Who is Frank Zhang over at MIT? We're going to talk about that right after a moment, after this word from our sponsors. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. As usual, you may reach me on Google Plus at D. Paul Williams, LinkedIn, Paul Williams, and the LinkedIn group Property Preservation Consortium, Twitter, Foreclosurepedia. We stream all our podcasts on iTunes, Foreclosurepedia. We have our screencasts over on YouTube, the Foreclosurepedia channel, and always at foreclosurepedia.org. We'd like to give a special shout out to Amazon.com, whom provides our S3 podcast and video storage, and Cloudflare for hosting Foreclosurepedia in 24 different geo-positioned servers, pro bono as well. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to give me a shout out, COO at foreclosurepedia.org.